Well, welcome everyone to this webinar today, All Things Census. I am Wendy Underhill. I'm with the National Conference of State Legislatures. I'm joined today by two representatives of the U.S. Census Bureau, James Whitehorn, who is the Bureau's point person for everything that relates to redistricting, and Michael Hawes, who is responsible for outreach and engagement on all the issues that relate to the impact of privacy protection methodologies on the accessibility and usability of census data. I'm very much looking forward to today's talk, and I think you may be as well. NCSL is very grateful that these two folks, James and Michael, are willing to be with us today. We are working in uncertain times with coronavirus throwing quite a wrench into census operations, but I guess we can just say that for decades, the Census Bureau and NCSL have worked well together, and this is just one more example of that close relationship. So thanks to you both. Also, thanks to everyone who's attending. The virus has upended just about everything in our lives, it seems like. So the fact that you're here means that you're not only taking care of the business of the moment, but also looking down the road to next year when the census data will arrive and redistricting will begin. If you would please, at this point it would be great to have you just say who you are in the chat box, maybe the state and maybe your affiliation and anything else you might like us to know. I think usually on a webinar people like to know who else is there. If there's any doubt about whether you don't see the chat box, then if you put the webinar in full screen mode, hopefully it will pop up for you, and I think you're looking for it in the lower left. I also like to just see who's on board so everybody gets comfortable with that chat box. That is where questions will be put. All right, I've got some more thank yous, and I'd like to offer my appreciation to all of the gold sponsors for this webinar series. That's Esri, Maptitude, and Zillion Info, and also to our silver sponsors you can see on this slide as well. The support of these sponsors has allowed NCSL to create a series of in-person seminars, some of which maybe you've been able to attend. We're hoping we can continue to have a couple out into the future. But we were planning on being in May in Las Vegas, and that's not possible because of coronavirus, and that's why we've created this series of webinars. And the support that was for the in-person seminars is fortunately helping us to do this Making the Maps webinar series. So thank you very much. And if you're looking for contact information for these folks, go to NCSL's Redistricting Vendors webpage. Then I also want to bring to your attention that NCSL has produced the Redistricting Law 2020 book. Its cover is pictured here, and you can go to the web page that's on that slide or just Google NCSL Redistricting Law 2020, and you'll get some information about it. It's 282 pages of straight-up information and analysis on redistricting. It's either good bedtime reading if you need to fall asleep or bad bedtime reading if you want something exciting, but it is complete, or as complete as we could make it. It is free for legislators and for legislative staff, and there's a price for everyone else. But on the webpage, if you do go there, you'll see an executive summary in PDF form, and that's proved useful to a number of people just to be able to explain to others why redistricting is such a complicated topic. Just above all of that, you can see a few tabs, and the bios for James and Michael are in one of those tabs, and then other resources that you might want to review are in a tab up there as well. A PDF of these slides and other things will be up in there as well. You can download those things at any point, and you can also download them after the fact. We will have an archive of this made available to all of you who are attending today, and we'll send you an email in the next few days or certainly within the week to explain how you can access that. At the end of the webinar, you'll be redirected to a short survey. Please stay on for that because that's how NCSL can learn, how we can do a better job the next time. And lastly, if you are having technical difficulties, please send us a message in the chat box. Our operator, Shannon, will reply to you privately and help to resolve that issue. All right, let's go to the next slide. We're going to be doing a little bit on all things census, and that means we won't be doing everything there is to know at any part of the census. What we've done is take all of the material that we could do a 3-day seminar on and divided it into 3 small parts. The first will be how the Census Bureau is adjusting its operations based on the pandemic. And the second is what I'm calling a regular report from the Bureau on recent decisions on how the data will be handled. And last, we'll look at how the Bureau is protecting data privacy, which has a significant impact on the accuracy of the data. Our hope is that there's something here for census beginners and also for census experts. If you do have questions that you don't want to ask here for any reason, including that you know that your question is so arcane that only a dozen people in the nation might understand it, feel free to send those to me at wendy.underhill@ncsl.org, and I will make sure that they get answered after the fact. Or James and Michael are very responsive as well, and you can go directly to them with your questions. Since there's 3 sections, we're going to take questions at the end of each section. Please add those in the chat box as we go. Almost your time, James, hang on. I just want to set the stage by saying that the census matters a lot because it is the foundation on which states ensure that political representation is divvied up equitably. Maybe even more importantly, census data is used to divvy up federal funding. So we all want and need the census to be as successful as it can be, which means basically as accurate as it can be. And that's what the Bureau wants too, so we're all on the same page here. And we know that the Bureau has been planning for literally more than 10 years for this 2020 census. They start that planning before they had the 2010 census out the door. And part of all of that planning has included deep contingency planning. I'm pretty sure the Bureau did not plan for a pandemic, though. None of us really did. And yet the Bureau is making forward progress, is moving along, and we really appreciate that. Let's learn how. Okay, James, your turn.
Thank you, Wendy. And I do want to start off with a thank you of my own to you and to NCSL for all the support that you provide the Census Bureau. My program in particular would not have such a nice open avenue to be able to engage in discussions of these topics with our primary stakeholders. And so it's an invaluable service that you all do for us, and it is truly appreciated. As Wendy mentioned, we've kind of got this broken up into 3 small topics, all of which are quite large topics by themselves, but we're going to try to get them to you through the course of this hour. We're going to do the 2020 census update. I'm going to talk about the redistricting data. I'm going to mention what the data is, but I more want to get across the point about how we're going to get that delivered. I'll talk about the CVAP data a little bit, and then there's a lot of slides on accessing data through the Census Data Explorer that I'm going to go through quickly in essence of time, but I wanted them to be in the slide deck so that people could have them as a resource to help them get started using this new data tool. So I'm going to jump right in with the elephant in the room. As many people know by now, and if you don't, I have to inform you that the Census Bureau has made a request and is requesting of Congress for relief from its legislative requirements of delivering apportionment data and redistricting data from the dates that are currently set of December 31st and April 1st to a end of April 30th and July 31st for new dates. We're doing so in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. We want to make sure that we're protecting the health and safety of the public and our workers as we go through the job of conducting the census. We want to make sure we're following federal, state, and local authorities. We realize that these different directives coming from many different areas all need to be followed in order to ensure that safety. So we want to ensure that, but we also want to ensure that we conduct a complete and accurate count of all communities in the country. And that's going to take a little more time given the circumstances. And so we've asked for that legislative relief. So the top line adjustments are just that we're going to delay some of our field data collection and so operations, and then also extend our self-response period till October 31st. They were originally scheduled to end on July 31st. We're asking that the apportionment counts to be delivered to the President be extended till April 30th of 2021, and the redistricting data being delivered to the states no later than July 31st of 2021. There's a link in here where we keep an updated list of operational adjustments, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through a few of the highlights in that list. We are extending that self-response phase all the way through the end of October. This means that our internet instrument, our phone questionnaire assistance centers will all be open for people to respond through self-response all the way through that time. That's critical for us, and we hope that people take advantage of that. The more people who self-respond, the fewer people we need to do follow-up operations for. Our group quarters operations, we've shifted that to April to September. Our update leave is the operation where for those addresses where the Census Bureau doesn't feel that it can mail a self-response materials, or an area that's experienced a natural disaster like a hurricane or a fire, we send people in to actually leave questionnaires at the households. So that operation has been pushed to June through July. We have our update enumerate. That's what people think of as the old-fashioned census, where actually we send someone to your door to conduct an enumeration in person with you. And that's June to July now as well. Our non-response follow-up. If we don't get a response through self-response, we still have to make sure we count everyone once and only once and in the right place. And so what we do is we send that small army of non-response follow-up enumerators out to help us obtain those responses. That was supposed to have started in May. It's now not going to start until August, and we'll conclude with the conclusion of field data collection on October 31st. We also have a few tentative operations here. We have remote Alaska. We have a tentative conclusion of that in June. You'll see the start date didn't change, and that's because we had already started that operation, but we've had to extend the completion of that operation out through June, and that's our tentative plan. The enumeration of transitory locations, these are highly mobile populations. We are working to restructure that for a September collection. And then there's some follow-on. I don't know if, hopefully the slide appears better on your screen than it does on mine. It looks like in translating it to the system, there may have been some issues, but that might just be on the presenter screen. There were some operations that needed additional coordination, and some of these were update leave in Puerto Rico, our mobile questionnaire assistance centers, our count of people experiencing homelessness. Those we need to work and engage with our partners a little more fully before we can restructure those activities. So, you know, I keep stressing the sense of the importance of self-response. Self-response this decade is easier than it's ever been. People can respond any way they want. They can respond online. They can respond by mail. They can respond by phone. The Internet self-instrument is optimized to be used on laptops, computers, smartphones, tablets. If it has an Internet connection, you should be able to use it to respond, which makes it so that people can respond anytime from or anywhere. I actually have a relative who's winters in Florida. She's 89 years old, and she's stuck in Florida now. She can't get back to her home in Ohio. And so she's been able to go onto her computer and still respond. She responded non-ID. Most households, when they receive their mailings, get an ID from which they can use to respond, and we can identify the household. But in our setting up of this census and to make it easier for people to respond, we have the ability for people to respond without that ID. So since she can't get home to get her mail, she was able to respond online non-ID, and we were able to get her counted in the self-response universe. If people need assistance to respond, we have 12 non-English languages in the Internet instrument. We have 59 non-English languages total with support materials, which covers almost 99% of the language needs of the country. So really trying to make sure that self-response is as easy as possible. And the self-response was originally open until mid-August, but we're now going to have that open until October 31st. This map is a little dated because I had to get my slides in, so this is actually from Friday of last week. But this is a tool that people can look at if they're interested in how response is going in their area. We had a 49.4% national response rate as of last Friday. I know that over the weekend that went over 50%, so doing great. And of course, Colorado, which I chose for the map because of NCSL's presence in Denver, is doing gangbusters, and I attribute that at least in part to the cheerleading that Wendy and others from NCSL have done on our behalf. So you can see that self-response is working. This is a useful tool that you can use. I've read news articles of states or cities where they get into friendly competitions to try to compete on the response rate, and it does tend to motivate the populace. So it's really a great tool for people to use around self-response. Things people can do to help us maximize self-response. Look to see how you can reach your constituents. If you represent people in some way, or you have a group that you regularly convene with, make sure you spread the word. If you have sort of social media presence, or if you have a blog, or you have a newsletter, the Census Bureau provides scripts and content to make sure that you're giving out authoritative information, and you can access them through the link that we've included on this slide here. But also make sure that people understand especially in hard-to-count communities, that the census is safe, secure, and confidential. People really need to know that so that they feel comfortable to provide their information to the Census Bureau. So I think with that, we'll pause there, and I think I'll hand that back to Wendy. I think she's got a few comments here as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. And I don't think that my team can take credit for Colorado's good response rate, but I appreciate the plug anyway. Many states do have a complete count committee, and they've been out there doing outreach every which way, and we're happy to talk to you about that all day long if you want to hear more about complete count committees and what states might be able to do. And I did notice on that slide that Minnesota is at the top of the heap in terms of responding at this point. Okay, I've got 3 questions for you. From Richard, how about block geography files? I'm not certain that exactly what that means, but if you know what that means, answer, and if you don't, we'll ask Richard to give a little more detail in the chat box.
We might need more detail from him, but if he's...
Okay. We'll get the more detail, and let's go on to Garrett's question. He wants to know about delivery plans for the states that have the constitutional deadlines that are right before or right after July 31st. So what's your rollout plan, and what states are going to go first, or if you know this? James, do you have an idea about the rollout of the states? Let me ask Michael, can you hear me? Is my voice in here?
I can hear you. I'm wondering if James is on mute or if we lost his connection.
Okay. Do you, by any chance, Michael, know the answer to what states will go first for the rollout of the data prior to the July 31st deadline?
So I do not know the answer to that, and I would defer to James once he's back here.
Okay. We'll hold that question. But we can't really go on to his section until we hear his voice. I bet he's back now. Are you back, James?
This is James. I apologize. My phone just randomly disconnected because of the joys of remote meeting.
Okay. Well, we're glad to have you. What can you tell us about the rollout of states prior to July 31st? Who goes first, and how are you deciding who goes first?
I'm going to talk about that in the next part of the presentation. So I don't know if we want to wait, and we can have that question after I give some remarks on that.
All right. And then Kim is asking, what are you hearing out of Congress on the likelihood they will approve your request to delay apportionment and redistricting deadlines?
From the conversations I've heard, and this isn't with conversations with Congress directly, but from conversations I've heard internally in the building, it's believed that this was discussed both with the Hill and through the administration prior to making the request, and that the chances are good, but of course it's a request to Congress, and Congress can choose to act how it wishes. So,
right, putting money on where Congress will go is a lot like playing the slots, perhaps. All right, well, I think with that we will move on to the next section, and it's all yours, James.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to switch gears here to, and I apologize for falling off. It was just a random thing with my phone. I'm going to switch gears to the census redistricting data. I will briefly describe what it is for those folks who may not know exactly what we're providing in the redistricting data, but then I will talk about the question about the delivery deadline. So first, the geographic products that we intend to produce from the census for the 2020 census to support redistricting. We have the shape files, which are the geographic files for geographic information systems, allow people to do computerized cartography and analysis. And there's a link here. This link goes to the generic TigerLine files page, or TigerLine shapefile page that the Census Bureau maintains. If you hold on to this link, that's where you will be able to find these redistricting files. But I'm also going to provide you a little cheat sheet at the end of this section where it might make it a little easier to remember and also easier to find once the data is actually out in the public eye. We're going to produce maps. These are PDF maps that are designed to be printed out on plotters. They do them for county block maps. So you have all the blocks that make up a county, state legislative and voting district maps, tract maps, school district maps, all for folks who may need to have maps to help them in their decision-making process in redistricting. Block assignment files are simple text listings of which blocks make up your geography, whether it's your place or your township. And then a block-to-block relationship file between 2010 and 2020 blocks in case you need to do some sort of analysis of a plan between the 2 decades off block level geography. If you've used the census redistricting data before from the 2010 census, you'd recognize most of these tables here. We have the race table we're going to produce, the race for the population 18 and over or voting age, the Hispanic or Latino, not Hispanic or Latino by race, and then the same for the voting age, and then a housing table with occupancy counts by status, meaning occupied or vacant. All of these tables and this data will be produced down to the census block level, which is the smallest piece of geography for which we produce data. And then we'll also have a group quarters population by group quarters type. This will be total population in group quarters. These are things like nursing homes, military barracks, prisons, those types of living situations. So we'll have those identified for folks as well who may have a need to alter those populations prior to conducting their redistricting. We did produce some of this data, and we provided prototype data back in February and March of 2019. This was for Providence, Rhode Island, because that's where our end-to-end census test was conducted in 2018. And this was the geographic support products that I just mentioned and the redistricting tabulations. The official data was originally planned to come out from November through February for the geographic products and February through March of the official tabulations. And then I just put this in here for illustrative purposes. This is not yet official, but this is sort of the design plan that we're going for. Is we're just going to shift that entire delivery window 120 days into the future, and then adjusting for a day or two there to make sure we're still meeting our public release on Thursdays. So that would make these dates March 19th through June 1st for the geography, and June 17th to July 31st of 2021 for the data products. So how is this data going to be delivered? So there's 2 methods of delivery. One is to the public and one is to the official recipients. The Census Bureau provides the data to the official recipients before releasing it to the public. And the official recipients, as identified in Public Law 94-171, are the governors, the legislative leadership, and the redistricting commissions if they exist, and commissioners have already been appointed. We'll track down the chair if there is one and make sure that people on the commission also have that data. The legislative leadership we send to both parties in both houses of the state legislature. If it's unicameral, we just send it to the one, and of course the governor gets copies of the data as well. They're going to be getting it in 2 channels this decade. The first is we will mail them by express mail physical media, which will be DVD with the data. And then they'll also, we're working to be able to also produce flash drives, recognizing that a lot of people don't have optical drives anymore. We're then going to also have them sign up, the official recipients sign up for what we call embargoed data. So through our Census Data Explorer, which is the replacement for the American Fact Finder, they'll be able to sign up for an account where the morning that these physical media are supposed to be arriving, they can also log in to this system and see their state's data. So there will be both of those methods. We will work that day that the data is arriving. We'll monitor the web traffic to see if people are logging in. If we see that they've logged in, we'll give them a phone call to confirm that they were able to access the data. If we haven't seen them log in, we'll check to see if the physical media has arrived. Once we see that it's been delivered to their office, we'll give it a little time to make it through the mailroom, and we'll again reach out by a phone call to confirm receipt there. We need to make sure that we confirm that both parties in the state have received the data and are able to begin their redistricting with that data. So once that data has been confirmed to be in the states, in the hands of the official recipients in the states, we'll go for public release. This will be through our Census Data Explorer that I mentioned. We also call that data.census.gov, and I apologize, but we tend to flip back and forth between the two with a little bit of inconsistency, but they mean the same thing. The Census Data Explorer has the full query functionality of the Census Data Explorer tool. We're also working to implement something called large data download. The specifics on that have not yet been ironed out. They're still exploring different options for performance. But what that should do as a minimum requirement is allow someone to download block level data for their state for all 6 of the PL tables. That's our performance metric there. So we're still working to get that developed, but that's something that we're working on. We will also do our traditional text file based files on the FTP site. We tend to say these are for expert users because they're multiple files that need to be linked together, and then you have to pull out subsets of those data. But it gives someone the full PL data, the registering data summary file with all the different levels of geography. It's relational tables for a relational database. There's the geo header, which is the one file which has all the geographic information, and then there's multiple data segments which each have some of the tables. You can see here that file 1 has table P1 and P2, file 2 has P3, P4, and H1, and then file 3 will have P5. This last line here about all stored as pipe to limited text files, including the geo header, this is very important for people who use the 2018 prototype data. This is a change. The geo header has typically been a fixed width file, and we received a lot of feedback that that is not very user friendly because people have to program the start positions and ending positions of each field and the field types. So to make that easier for people to use, we've made the geo header file a pipe to limited text file, just like the data segments are already. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit to the CVAP data. This is the citizen voting age population by race and ethnicity. This is another tabulation that comes out of my office typically. We've done this as an annual tabulation since 2011. It's typically created off of the American Community Survey 5-year estimates, and we've done it every year since 2011, as I mentioned. It's typically released in the first week of February each year. We've changed that for the 2020 census. We're working to calculate this data using administrative records for the 2020 census. So it'll be the first special tabulation off of the 2020 census, and it's expected to be released. It was going to be released by March 31st. Now, if we project forward, that would be by July 31st of 2021. You can see on the left-hand side here the content. It's abbreviated tables, very similar to what you see in table P4 from the redistricting data set, and very similar to the tabulations we've been producing across this last decade, with the addition of one field, some other race alone, which was not typically in the ACS data. This will be for several levels of geography, but the important thing to note here is we were limited to block group with the American Community Survey data because that's the smallest geographic area for which American Community Survey data is published. But since we're using decennial data as the core for this special tabulation, we are now able to create this at the block level. So I mentioned I would give you a cheat sheet on how to roll through the, or to find the data. And this is the cheat sheet here. This is my office's website, which you can get to very easily by going to www.census.gov/RDO, which stands for Redistricting Data Office. And these 4 areas on the right, the Redistricting Data Program Management, which is where the information that we use with our state liaisons to conduct our geographic exchange work. We put the prototype data there, and it's there available now. When the official data is out in 2021, under the Decennial Census Redistricting Data Summary Files page, we'll make sure that there's links there to all of the official data, including the geography. And then if you're looking for the CVAP data, if you notice in that gray bar, there's a voting rights record that you can click on, and that'll take you to both the CVAP data and the Section 203 language determinations data, which is another special tabulation that my office is responsible for. So right from this page, you can use this as a central clearinghouse and quickly get to the data that you need for your state or states that you're representing. So I'm going to go through this part very quickly because I want to make sure that there's plenty of time. And this can be used as sort of a cheat sheet, but I just wanted to make sure people are aware that the American Fact Finder is no longer up and running. It was retired on March 31st, and the Census Data Explorer, which is data.census.gov, is a replacement platform for that. This sort of next series of slides is actually a sort of walkthrough that will walk you through how to use the tool. And I'm going to go through this very quickly. You'll get copies of these slides from this session. and then you'll be able to use these on your own. But if you just go to the advanced search, as most people would do with American Fact Finder for redistricting purposes, you can pick your data set. You go in, if you're looking for a specific geography and you're looking for state legislative district in your state, you can go through, and there's an easy series of menus that as you make your selections, they expand out, and you can click until you get the selections that you want. And then you can just click to view your tables. The tables will list on the left-hand side. You can see previews of each table on the right-hand side. If you want to download them, you can click download. Then you select the tables that you want to download, so that if you want to select multiples, like the entire set of the PL data set, and then you can download the files. It'll give you a progress bar depending on how much you're asking for. It may take a few minutes for it to prepare it, but then the download link will come live, and you can pull that down to your computer in a zip file, and you'll have that ready to go. It's important to note that you'll see three files in there. You'll have the table title, which the data file and the metadata file. The table title has information about the data that you just downloaded, the source information, the confidentiality statement, any user notes. You have the data file, which actually is the data tables that you were looking for. And then you have the metadata file. And the metadata file is actually just telling you what the interpretation of the field names are, since they're in their short code version. So, and I think with that, I hopefully caught up with my time from dropping off, and I'll let this go back to Wendy.
All right. Well, I'm going to back us up one slide, James, so that we're still with your stuff. And I want to say that we probably need a whole webinar on how to use data.census.gov, but that'll be for a different day down the road. Thanks for going through so much great stuff. We've got a few questions for you. We had two questions about Native American reservations or tribal boundaries. Are these included in the data that you're producing?
Yes. Part of the summary levels that are produced for tabulation, for the tabulation data and for the geographic files, includes American Indian Alaska Native areas.
Excellent. And we want to know about CVAP data. Does it include margins of error? Or will it include, I should say?
The product as it's being designed will not have margins of error. There may be a revision to it much farther down the road where those will get calculated, but currently there's no plan to have them in the product that we're releasing by July 31st.
Okay, I can imagine that some folks are sort of wishing for it, but I also know other folks are probably glad to have just one number, and people can say that's the census number. Blake also asks if there's a way that folks can receive a notification when new files are made available. Do you have like a distribution list for that kind of thing?
We'll be working with our public information office. Typically what we'll do is we'll announce 1 week in advance which states will be coming out the next week, and we'll then publish them to the, when we publish them the next week, there'll be a press announcement for that as well, and we'll also then announce the next week's tranche of files that will be coming out. For the geography files, we can work with our geography division to add that to the Tiger Line announcement list. So when redistricting shape files are released, that Tiger Line list can announce those to the public for those who are signed up.
Okay, that sounds great. And that is a good lead into next question from Kim Brace. Is there any chance that the Tiger files will come out earlier than March 19th so that we can start building our databases in our redistricting software?
There is. From several stakeholders, I've had the comment that would be helpful. And so I've been promoting that internally as we're evaluating our schedule based on these delays. We've put that as a principle that if it's possible, without endangering or adding risk to other operations, that we would like to see that.
Okay, I appreciate that flexibility and you taking that message forward. Last question, will any of the ACS results be incorporated into the administrative records to come up with a total citizen or non-citizen number in the CVAP tables?
The CVAP tables themselves will not carry a total citizen, not total non-citizen category. And there, as far as I know, there's no intention to add the ACS data to bring that data over.
Excellent. James, thank you. I'm going to let you rest for a few minutes. I've got 2 slides of my own, and then we're going to go to Michael. So I just wanted to pop up a slide of City University of New York's self-response for fair and accurate 2020 census slide. This is a fairly easy to use, interactive, goes down to a very granular level. It's a way for anybody out there who wants to see how your district is doing, not just your state, but your district or even any communities within it, to see how well they're responding at this point. More blue means that there have been more responses, so not surprisingly, Minnesota looks fairly blue there. And what matters isn't so much the state by state, it's this detail, and that's what you're going to get there. And then in terms of the flip side of high response rate is who's hard to count. And this slide just gives you a list of some of the folks who are considered to be hard to count and a link to a census web page that shows where those hard to count populations are. And then the question, of course, is what can be done about that? Well, that is a great deal of the work that the Census Bureau is doing and the states are doing to be in communication with people who are in those communities to explain why it matters and make it as easy as possible, which I know the Census Bureau is doing. So with that, I think we are ready to turn it over to you, Michael.
Great, thank you, Wendy. So in the interests of time, I'm actually going to skip a number of my slides here and not go into the background of what differential privacy is, except to say that it essentially, I'm going to skip ahead here. Differential privacy is a new approach to privacy protection that we're adopting that relies on calculation of the privacy risk for any table that we're producing, any data product that we're producing. And by calculating that risk, it allows us to then inject precisely calibrated amounts of noise or error into the data that is sufficient to protect the privacy of specific individuals. If any of the listeners today want to learn more about the foundations of differential privacy and why we're applying it for the 2020 census, I have a link at the end of my presentation to a number of resources on our website that go into all of this in much more depth and detail. So please check those out if you'd like to learn more. And I'm going to kind of skip to what the implications are and what we've been doing over the last few months to improve the accuracy and the fitness for use of the census data that are going to be coming out with differential privacy. So what does the adoption of differential privacy mean for the 2020 census? Well, for starters, I want to be abundantly clear that our adoption of differential privacy will not alter our constitutional mandate to apportion seats for the House of Representatives using the actual enumeration of the state populations. So state populations will be released exactly as they are enumerated with no noise added. Our remaining data products, including the PL94-171 redistricting data, will have privacy protections applied as they have in prior censuses, only this time the noise will come from differential privacy rather than from the record swapping mechanism that we used in the past. Last fall, the disclosure avoidance system team's priorities were to scale our system up so that it would be able to run on a file the size of the 2020 census. We also needed to demonstrate that in doing so, we were able to effectively protect privacy at that scale. And we needed to start the process of evaluating and optimizing the system for accuracy and fitness for use for the major uses of decennial census data, and most notably for redistricting. These initiatives were largely successful, but much more work needs to be done over the remainder of 2020. And throughout these initiatives, the engagement and efforts of our data users have been enormously helpful to the identification and prioritization of the work that remains to be done. In December of 2019, we partnered with the National Academy of Sciences Committee on National Statistics to host a workshop on our switch to differential privacy. At that workshop, data users from a wide array of disciplines and representing very diverse data use cases presented their analyses of a set of demonstration data that we produced back in October where we ran 2010 census data through an interim version of our disclosure avoidance system. The findings that those participants presented at the workshop helped us to identify where changes need to be made in our algorithms to ensure sufficient accuracy and fitness for use for these priority use cases of decennial census data. So what did we learn? Well, the workshop participants' analyses confirmed what our own internal evaluations discovered, that the October vintage of our disclosure avoidance system did fall short on ensuring fitness for use for a number of important use cases. In particular, there were notable amounts of error in those data in population counts for political geographies, for American Indian, Alaskan Native tribes, as well as some systemic biases in urban and rural populations and housing statistics and vacancy rates. There were two sources of error in the demonstration data that we released in the fall. The first is the differentially private noise that's injected into the data to protect privacy. This type of noise is statistically unbiased and is infinitely tunable through the Bureau's selection of the privacy loss budget for the 2020 census. The second source of error, however, comes from the post-processing done in the algorithm to convert the now private data into the non-negative integer values that we're used to seeing in census data. In the demonstration data, it was the post-processing error that was substantially larger than the differential privacy error. And unlike the statistically neutral noise of differential privacy, the post-processing introduced the substantial distortions that our data users that were presenting at the workshop identified. The good news is that the post-processing error can be addressed through changes and improvements to the algorithm design without impacting the privacy guarantees of differential privacy. Interestingly, the post-processing error didn't show up until we ran the demonstration data in October. Earlier runs of our system on smaller sets of tabulations were much better behaved. Why? Well, apparently the disclosure avoidance system had some unanticipated difficulties processing the huge number of tabulations that had zeros or very small counts. And that difficulty introduced the distortions that we observed in those demonstration data products. Fortunately, there are a number of ways to address this issue, and we're already at work to correct for them. One of the most promising improvements to the algorithm to address these issues is the adoption of what we're calling a multi-pass approach to the post-processing. Prior versions of our algorithm ran all of the post-processing at once, hence the trouble it had with the noisy zeros for combinations of attributes that are uncommon at low levels of geography. The new approach, sorry, scrolling my notes here. The new approach is running these passes in stages and constraining each pass to the values determined the pass before. So the first pass of the algorithm under the new design will determine the population totals for each geographic entity down to the block level. The second pass will run tabulations for the PL94-171 redistricting data files, constraining those values to the population totals determined in the first pass. The third pass will then run the roughly 3 million tabulations needed to support our population estimates program and most demographic uses of census data, constrained to the values determined in the second pass. And then the final pass of the algorithm will determine the remainder of the tabulations needed for the demographic and housing characteristics file. This new multi-pass approach should substantially improve accuracy for all of the tabulations, but particularly for the priority use cases of census data. But as they say, the proof is in the pudding. We don't want you just to take our word for the fact that we're resolving these issues. We have been developing a set of objective metrics based on our priority use cases and stakeholder feedback. These metrics will allow us to regularly report out on the improvements that we're making to the system and to the accuracy of our data. And they'll enable our data users to continue evaluating and informing the remaining work as we continue to improve the system over the remainder of the year. These proposed accuracy measures are available on our website. You can just search for 2020 Disclosure Avoidance System Updates on our webpage, census.gov. We want these measures to be useful indicators for our data users to observe and evaluate our progress towards ensuring that our data products will be sufficiently accurate for your intended uses. So we are soliciting feedback on whether these are the appropriate error measures and accuracy measures to be using. If you have suggestions or additional measures you'd like us to be reporting out on, you can send them to us at 2020-DAS@census.gov. So the modernization of our disclosure avoidance methods for the 2020 census has not been an easy undertaking, but the growing vulnerabilities of our traditional approaches to protecting privacy mean that we need to adopt 21st century solutions to counter emerging 21st century privacy threats. The design and optimization of our disclosure avoidance system is still ongoing, as I mentioned, and will continue over the remainder of this year. If you do want to learn more about this initiative, please go to the website linked here, and you can, even if you're interested in kind of digging under the hood, you can even find public versions of the disclosure avoidance algorithms that we're using. If you have any suggestions, please send them in to us. We want to hear from our data users for ways that we can improve, or any suggestions that you might have. And with that, I think we have a few minutes left for questions. So.
I just want to say that this team is quite remarkable, the way we got a little behind and now we got ahead, and everything's working out just great. So thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, James. I've got a few thoughts, and then we're going to go to questions from everyone else, and by all means put them in the chat box. The first is that I think everybody really loved the demonstration data set, and I understand you're not sending out another one for us. We got that message. But what about feedback? What kinds of feedback are useful to you? I know you said you're happy to take it. Can you put a little meat on those bones and explain what kind of feedback at this point for feedback on how you're going to proceed with the disclosure avoidance and then the post-processing? What is useful to you?
Sure. So at the end of the day, the challenge is that we cannot release perfectly accurate statistics for every conceivable use of census data while also protecting privacy. The only way to protect privacy, if we're releasing the vast amounts of data that are included in the census data products, is there has to be noise introduced to some of them. We have to prioritize some uses over another and prioritize some tabulations over others. Accuracy and privacy are finite resources in this. And so feedback that would be particularly useful for us would be twofold. First, understanding where there are acceptable trade-offs. Saying, okay, these tabulations or these cross-tabulations of attributes are most important, versus these other cross-tabulations of attributes may be less important. And knowing that allows us to allocate our privacy loss budget in a way that prioritizes accuracy for the important uses. So hearing either cross-tabulations of variables or levels of geography for those tabulations, knowing which are most important and which are less important helps us assign more accuracy to the more important ones. Similarly, understanding what kind of thresholds for accuracy would be acceptable, with the understanding that there has to be some noise in these data to protect privacy, understanding what threshold of accuracy is necessary for the data to be considered fit for use. Recognizing that this is one source of error amongst many. There's measurement error, coverage error, operational errors, undercounts, etc. Our goal is for the impact of the error from differential privacy to be less than those other sources of error, but understanding what minimum threshold for accuracy to be fit for use would be helpful feedback to get.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. Gina's asking, when do you need that kind of feedback by?
So again, work is ongoing. So we're happy to receive any feedback that listeners today or in the future can provide throughout the remainder of certainly the spring and the summer. Final decisions on design of the system and on setting and allocating the privacy loss budget will be made under the current schedule between September and December of this year. So certainly earlier is better than later, but we're accepting feedback through the end of summer, certainly.
All right. And if anyone out there would like to see other people's feedback, a number of state demographers have sent in letters, and legislative leadership in Utah has, and one Republican attorney has sent in letters, and those are linked on NCSL's Differential Privacy Explained webpage, and Christy put the link for that up there. So that could give you some ideas about what other people are saying. Let's see. We also want to know if you've made any progress on using disclosure avoidance on detailed race or household composition tables. That's from Susan.
Yes. So while we're using differential privacy for all of the 2020 census data products, the different sets of products pose different privacy challenges. The detailed race and detailed ethnicity and American Indian Alaska Native summary files, because of the vast number of permissible values when you consider, for example, the race categories with detailed race all alone or in combination, that vast number of possible values would explode the privacy loss budget if we used the primary disclosure avoidance system top-down algorithm to address. So in order to optimize for accuracy of the different sets of data products, we actually are using two different sets of algorithms, both that are differentially private, to generate the data products for those two different sets of, for the two different sets of data products. Work is ongoing on both algorithms. The top-down algorithm, which I was referring to earlier, is producing the PL94 file and the demographic and housing characteristics file and demographic profiles. Our secondary system will be used to produce the detailed race and detailed ethnicity. We should have more information to share on that second group of data products over the coming weeks and months.
And Susan, if that's not the exact precise answer that you want, let's go to Michael offline about that. We had two people interested in this question. Given there is likely to be a delay in the release of the PL data, will there be oh, no, wait, we've got that part. Wait, I got to get back to my question. I think you've already answered this. If the delay will mean that the Bureau can produce a second release of the full demonstration data set, I think you've said no to that. But you can see why states are interested in that, because they want to see how the differential privacy and the post-processing impact their own states. Am I right that the answer is no, there's not time for a second run of that?
Correct. Generating the demonstration data is incredibly labor intensive, and the subject matter experts within the Bureau who would be responsible for doing that have their hands full with census operations right now, so there just isn't the opportunity to generate more demonstration data. That's why we've created these sets of accuracy measures, so that even though we can't release new demonstration products, we can release quantitative and measurable indicators of improvements in accuracy and fitness for use. So we will be releasing these kind of results of each kind of iterative improvement to the disclosure avoidance system. We'll be running those error measures and releasing those publicly, so that all of our data users can see, okay, the data are becoming fit for use, okay, they meet our quality requirements.
And I plan myself to understand those metrics a little bit better than I did before, and I imagine most people on the lines are thinking, okay, metrics, let's go find them, let's go figure out what they mean. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Isn't there a Friday deadline for submitting any comments on those metrics? And if so, can we get that shifted?
So we yes, we established when we released the proposed set of measures, we did say we would like feedback by April 24th. However, we recognize that not everybody heard about the measures at the same time, and it may take people kind of more time kind of parsing through them to identify where improvements could be made. We will continue to accept feedback on those measures, and as the feedback comes in, we may add new measures or change some of the ones that are included. But yeah, if you can get comments in by the 24th, that would be great. If not, we will still consider feedback that comes in on those measures on an ongoing basis.
You're on record with that. Thank you. Thank you very much for being flexible on that. Keith is asking about the urban versus rural systemic biases, and I think you've already explained that the first time you ran the data, you had a lot of zeros and that you weren't expecting to gum up the works, but it did sort of strike some people first time out of the box that, whoa, urban-rural is a pretty darn big problem. Where are you on fixing that particular part of it?
So yeah, so that was where the algorithm essentially broke, and it hadn't included those biases when we had run the smaller sets of tabulations because there weren't the huge number of zeros and very small values. The switch to the multi-pass processing should greatly improve that, and we're going to have the first measures of those improvements out in the coming weeks using those error measures. But yeah, we're making good progress on solving that problem.
Okay, I love it. Now we're basically out of time. I do want to call to people's attention that this is one of a series of webinars, and you can see what's coming up next. And please join us for as many of those as are of interest to you. And also, please stay on the line if you would, and give us a little bit of information in a little short survey. We will make each of our webinars better based on what you all say. That's kind of crowdsourcing our design process. So please let us know what's true for you. And let's all have a round of applause for James and Michael for being willing to come on the line, provide all kinds of stuff in in 58 minutes, and then to take questions as detailed as some of the ones we've done today. So thank you both very much, and thanks for everyone for participating today. And with that, unless there's anything that James or Michael wants to say, going once, going twice.
Thank you.
James, do you want to say something? Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.